Okay, welcome to today's long-term plan briefing schedule. Welcome all elected members. We have Councillor Paniora online. Just want to say that yesterday we had a death in the district on a Ventia job, and that's a terrible tragedy. I don't have any further details, but I'd like to extend all our condolences to the family for that. For a good thing when someone doesn't come home from work. Okay, Tracy Dean will present this item in person, the long-term plan introduction and update. Thank you, Tracy.
Mr. Mayor, so good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Well, this is sliding. Lovely. So today we're discussing the last pieces of the consultation puzzle before seeking adoption at the council meeting on the 27th of March to take plan your ideas out to the community. We're actually at the start of the formal process now. So together we've done all the legwork and now the official process begins that will write your final long-term plan. It's time to ask the community to feedback. You'll see from this diagram that adoption this month isn't the final. There are opportunities to make changes right through to adoption in July and beyond. Over the coming months, staff will receive and process the community feedback, but they'll also continue to look for the rates reductions that you have been asking for. Revised information comes back to you through May to process for your final touches into a long-term plan for July. That's not the end of it. After July, the LTP, after it's adopted, the annual plan process begins. So the statute understands that we live in a dynamic environment and things change overnight, as we had with the storms. We've been through this before, 2 or 3 times with this LTP already. So once you've adopted your LTP, the annual plan process enables you to make further changes to the LTP. So don't feel like we're at the end of anything. We are at the beginning. So today we're going to work through the final 2 source documents, which are the development contributions policy and some financial statements with the finance team later. Before we get to LTP items, you have a report on the private road ceiling extension policy that Shireen will run you through. This is actually not part of the LTP process, but obviously feeds the information that's useful to you in this process. So I shall pass you over to Shireen, who should be online, I think.
Morena.
Just let me know when you want your slides switched, Shireen.
Thank you. Kia ora. I can see my slides up, so Alana's kindly agreed to share the slides. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thanks, Shireen.
Great. Thank you. Shall I proceed, Your Worship?
Yes, continue. Thank you.
Thank you. So elected members requested a review of the road seal extension policy late last year. We brought a briefing item to council last year and have now done some further work. So the summary of what is in the report is on the second slide. If I could ask Alana to show the second slide. So we got some legal advice and there's some, first slide is this is just a reminder of the substantive elements of the policy. So currently the policy says that council may consider setting a targeted rate and to fund up to 50% of the total cost of a road, and that for that targeted rate to proceed, ultimately 75% of the affected community members must agree to it. And that rate will be set no longer than 10 years. The summary of the report, then next slide please, Alana, is that we sought some legal advice on the current policy and a potential future policy or amendments to the policy based on feedback from elected members. So the summary of that is targeted rates must be set in accordance with the statutory process. The current policy is unclear and vague in relation to how it links into the statutory process, but that could be improved with drafting. The statutory process to set a targeted rate includes a requirement to consult. So there were some issues raised in the legal advice regarding the threshold provision, the current 75% threshold or a lower threshold provision being considered predetermination. before a statutory consultation process to then lead into the decision-making requirements under section 77 to 79 of the Act. So a decision to proceed, and then also a decision to proceed after consultation without full support from all affected entities who would be required to pay the targeted rate may be challengeable through a judicial review, depending on the exact circumstances at the time. We also did some research about other councils in the district. No other councils in the country have a policy like this. There is one other council in the country that has a range of options to fund private road seal extension, one of which is a targeted rate, and that would be only applied to those who agree to the targeted rate. It's unclear. We haven't done the research into whether that is a legally valid way of doing it. All policies require a minimum of 50% contribution, and then the 4 other policies, and then the balance is funded through general rates. So next slide, please, Alana. So as a result of that research, the summary of the report is that retaining the policy in its current format is problematic due to the advice received, and we're seeking direction on next steps.
Yeah, questions? Councillor Vincent?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just really put forward a suggestion in the form of a question, as in, would this fly? The option of, clearly I can see it's simple if what would otherwise be the local share is met from the general rate, and the balance then to be met from contributions from the benefiting landowners. So it's like the existing policy, except without the benefit of having a targeted rate. I would say that probably not going to be too many people would be going for that. But I just wonder, Shireen, could you see that as a potentially viable option? At least
Through
from a
the
legal
chair.
standpoint?
Through the chair, sorry, I didn't explain myself very well. The other policies, all the other policies in the community require an upfront contribution by the benefiting ratepayers, and then the balance is paid through the general rate. So it's funded through council as a general rate. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, councillor.
Well, that's sort of what I was suggesting.
Yeah.
So it's removing the targeted rate element, yes, but instead imposing the
yes,
barrier, if you like, or the challenge of those people who are on that road that they want sealed to come up with what would otherwise have been NZTA's share, I guess.
Yes,
however they might do that.
I would add to that the people I got hold of to talk about their policies, the benefiting ratepayers, it is up to them to contribute, to work out how and who contributes the funds. So it's not a council-led process in terms of those people who do or don't want to pay. It is just the community has to agree amongst themselves to contribute the funds required by council. One policy has got a contribution. Most policies have got a minimum 50%. Some of them may request up to 100% community contribution for an application to proceed.
Yeah, okay. Just thinking out loud about it, because I could imagine 2 adjoining properties worth, say, $5 million each, and one has no mortgage and the other has a $4 million mortgage. They'd have quite a different disposition to the idea of chucking in $100,000.
But they still benefit equally.
But and it might be in that case that, yeah, as between them without the council intervening, I'm just trying to get a handle on how that might work. That then one would step forward and say, well, we'll cover that share just to get the job done or whatever. But the council, from what you're saying, I've got that right, council would stay away from that negotiation.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Oh, well.
Okay.
One option.
Questions from Councillor Naya, Councillor Paniora and Deputy Mayor Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we don't know the extent of how many private roads we have. We'll have to work on how much funding from council to put on either general rates or even give it the debt, as one of the lawyer alluded to. I'm not in a position to give direction at this stage without data, but I would like, generally speaking, to keep the status quo and not get involved in a situation where the ratepayers are suffering for private road funding. Thank you. Can you explain a little bit of how much is the how many private roads potentially we will get involved in?
No private roads,
Private road ceiling.
not about private roads.
We don't have any private roads in the district.
Well, private road seal extension policy, isn't it?
Oh, no, private,
Through Mr. Chair, so basically what it is, it's an option for residents on a
Yeah,
road in the Kaipara district that is one of our roads
yeah,
to seal
Still,
yeah,
and pay for a portion of that.
yeah.
That's what it's about.
So all I'm trying to say, why the other ratepayers get involved in the follies of developers who are responsible to develop private roads? Why the
They're
other,
two different things, Ed.
sorry?
They're two different things.
some are after the private.
Private,
Yes, yeah.
yeah,
Like-
private road seal extension,
it's like road seal.
Not
is one-
private road.
one thing.
yeah.
Okay,
Not private road.
yeah, okay.
Sealing, like privately paying for the sealing of public roads.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Paniori had a question?
Morena, thank you through the chair. Shireen, I'm still trying to wrap my head around where the liability sits. So, can you just clarify your comment around that depending on the circumstances on a case by case basis, there may be judicial reviews. What sort of examples would that apply to?
Through the chair, so please accept that I'm not the lawyer, but I have read the legal advice, so please forgive me if I'm not explaining it very well. And the way I understand it, and my colleagues who've also seen the legal advice are welcome to step in here. The way I read the advice is that there's always there is in general law there is an argument for unreasonableness, and the reason why I said it depends on the circumstances at the time, it would depend on the level of targeted rate to be applied and the ability to pay for those ratepayers, for any ratepayers who opposed a target, who did not agree to a proposed targeted rate. So that's why, does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question in terms of liability. So I'm hearing conflicting pieces of advice, because on the one hand, we're saying that it's a community-led effort where the ratepayers will decide whether they want the road or not, which leads me to the question then, why would there be a judicial review when we're only implementing what the community want? They're coming to us and then we're funding 50%. So if we're saying that we're bringing along more people that don't want to be involved in it, and I think is the policy 51%, and then it goes up to 75%. So there's 25% that are being potentially under this policy being brought along and not wanting to be brought along on this. I can't wrap my head around how, as a council, and this might be why no council's done it, how a council could possibly require in a legal sense those 25% to pay for a road that they, as owners of their homes and not of the road, don't want to pay. So I don't know how, in just general law, how a person who owns a property then can then be legally required to pay, to contribute directly towards a road, and then on top of that, in a judicial review application, if they brought it to the court, they would say we weren't consulted on this. policy. And we would say, well, yes, we put out a consultation document and a long-term plan, but at that point in time, that landowner would never have known that they would have been captured within this policy that we're establishing or finalising on the 27th of March. And I just don't think that there'd be any legal standing there. So where does that leave us?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so Councillor Paniora, thank you. I mean, you're effectively summarising the issues with the current policy, which Shireen has outlined as well. So yeah, you're right. That's what we're saying about the current policy and the perceived flaws in it, the issues at hand.
Okay, councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you just go back, please, to the previous slide where you were talking about judicial review? That under the statutory process sub-point judicial review, I mean, it's very much a cover-all statement, isn't it? Any decision could be subjected to judicial review, including any of our rating policies.
Correct.
And the comment that 50% of the people as a minimum had to agree in the community, that was relating to roading policies in other councils. Is that correct? Because we don't have any other policies with a threshold in our council, so it's not our community.
Through the chair, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but the 50% I mentioned in terms of other policies, that was just that the policy required the community to provide at least 50% of the costs up front before council would consider funding the rest through general rates.
Sure.
So that's where my 50% comment came from, but I'm not sure if I've understood your question correctly.
That's fine. That's in policies in communities other than our community that you researched, not in policies in our community. Yes.
No, so that's other private, privately funded road seal extension policies have that kind of provision. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just in comment on what Councillor Vincent was alluding to. He was, I think, alluding to something similar in that in the absence of subsidy for seal, a position that council could take is that it might require the ratepayer to pay the equivalent of what NZTA would pay, which is 62%. And then council might fund 38% through general rate, which was normally would be the council's, which is slightly different to a 50-50 arrangement, but maybe a more equitable way of looking at it. If we decided to ever have a policy, it would appear that current policy isn't particularly on more than one level. It's never been able to be landed with the current thresholds, and it also has some legal issues. Seems a little bit unusual that the threshold of requirement to have agreement is such a problem when we have other targeted rates where no agreement is required and we just impose it. And so that really sort of stands out as a bit of a contradiction in the advice to me. But I don't know that we need to go too much further with it, because it looks like we're in a position where we can't really go out with a viable changed policy, and the existing policy possibly is to be rescinded, so it doesn't work legally. I think there are other ways that we can deal with this, and we need to look at how we can, use subsidised rehab to actually make our roads better and reduce the overall. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth.
Yeah, one of my questions has been asked, but the other one is if the landowner, say it be a single property owner who wants their road sealed to their driveway, if they give a 50% contribution, does that force the council to do it, or is it still on an approval basis?
So through the chair, the 50% threshold that I mentioned is just a minimum. So I was trying to point out that every single other council requires at least 50% contribution from the ratepayers. So each of those policies that I reviewed, like I say, some in response to Deputy Mayor's comment regarding NZTA, one of the policies also relates to the NZTA funding, so that is a possibility. So, all of the policies are a process. So it's if the community comes to council and says we want to fund this, this is the situation, and then the policy just steps them through the process. But the main premise is that a council would choose to set a precedent. Council can choose whatever kind of percentage or format or quota that they would require for an application, and then council would choose how to fund that through general rates. So council can either establish a fund in its long-term plan or its annual plan, or it might, depending on the cost, the total cost, council may be able to fund the balance through existing budgets. So it's not, the 50% is possibly misleading. But the idea is that all of the policies require upfront full contribution of a certain amount, at least 50%, and then council will fund the rest through general rates after meeting a criteria.
You probably answered in a way, but you didn't directly answer the question. If they do meet the percentage, whatever is decided, does that force the council to proceed? I hear there's an application, and that would be the hint that no, it's not a given. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. No, it's not a given. There'll be a process. There needs to be other funds set aside as well, and council would have the decision-making authority there.
Councillor Howard, followed by Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's possible that I've got all of this totally messed up, but as I see it with this, I think we have a minimum at the moment, and I think that might be 75% that have got to agree. But what we have is essentially a no ceiling policy because we don't have the money and it's not funded. And, you know, it's neat that communities or elements of communities can come and ask, you know, if their road can be sealed, if they agree to it. But I'm not so sure on that basis, given our overall policy reluctance to do sealing other than maintenance sealing, except in very few circumstances as far as I'm aware, why we would consider even the subsidy contributing as much as 38%, as would be normally the case. Now, if a community wants to have their road specifically sealed for their own purposes and ultimately for the benefit of all of those that are there, it's probably been too hard-nosed, but surely it is up to them to fund it. They have a desire. They know the position of council. And you know, if council just can't do it or won't do it, that's their decision, whether they go ahead or not. That's how I see it, you know, at this juncture anyway. It's probably a bit too hard-nosed.
For someone from a sealed road.
Privately done.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I have got abreast of the idea of private sealing now, but coming back to the same, I concur with Councillor Howard, and I am a tough nose, a tough stand as well, and no two hoots about putting rates at all in private road sealing, even if those people want to do it. And one thing I think we are forgetting. We are not smarter than rest of 66 councils to have a policy just for Kaipara District Council. Let us leave it to central government to frame a local government policy, how the roads are to be run, rather than individually nitpicking, wasting time, and trying to make a judgment call as a judge. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a kinetic thinker, so when I went for a walk, I came back with an idea, if I may. what about the approach that the default is as per NZTA standard? In other words, the locals have to come up with the NZTA contribution, the council, the balance. That could be boosted in where there is a safety concern and sealing the road would address the safety concern, or there was a traffic count threshold at pick a number, 200 vehicles a day or whatever, that gives it extra points. Or also in the circumstance where the road was cheaper to maintain if it was sealed. Now, I understand, and I could be corrected by this because I'm not an engineer, that there are some roads which will be cheaper to maintain sealed because of the nature of the traffic, like no heavy trucks on it, or very few heavy trucks, whereas some it's clearly more expensive to maintain sealed. And it might depend on the ground conditions as well as what the traffic is and so on. But that's just some ideas to kick around that might say boost the contribution that the council might put in for the sake of the common good. So that was just something I wanted to chuck into the middle there.
I agree.
Okay, councillor Larson, followed by councillor Williams.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of confusion around this matter and still in terms of the word private. Because we're not talking about private roads, we're talking about private individuals contributing to the upgrading of council roads. And under our draft LTP, we have all agreed to one of our community outcomes being dependable roading. Now, dependable roading might not mean any sealing at all, or it might. We certainly have had quite a push from some roads wanting to get seal and being unsuccessful in multiple rounds of trying to use the current policy because of the threshold being slightly too high and perhaps council not being as proactive as it could have been in helping to make it happen. Prior to NZTA changing its policy on seal extension on council roads, council did fund extension of seal. It was only the fact that we had a change of central government policy where they said we won't fund any seal extension that we stopped because 100% was going to have to be paid out of general rate. And in actual fact, prior to that policy change, the rate, the local share at that time, which was, I think, 39%, gone down to 38% now, was paid on all of our seal extension on all of our council roads out of general rate. So the sort of cry that it's unfair and unreasonable is a little bit out of kilter with what convention has always been and probably would be if NZTA changed its policy back to allowing subsidy at 62%. So, yeah, I think there's a little bit of history there, which probably context about what might be considered to be reasonable. And I think in terms of our LTP and the idea of having dependable roading, it's something that maybe we should have in the mix and allow people to try to upgrade their road by making some extra contributions. My thoughts. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. I just had a question about the roading development contributions and if that's an area that could be applied to the equation for a large catchment road that have had a lot of development. I just wondered if that was perhaps an option.
Through the chair, yes, that is an option, and we do that. And in fact, Black Swamp Road is, I think that's the one that's about to be sealed, and we've got 100% funding for that. But the council has come in and said they do the second seal because we have monies there to contribute.
Okay, so that could add to the lessening the burden on ratepayers.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Taking on board Councillor Larson's point and to my initial stance, I think that, I guess what I'm getting at is, I think it's neat that a community, a small community, a road-based community, wants to upgrade you know, their access and seal it. I think there's an element of pride, there's an element of all sorts in there. I'm coming from the point of view is that at the moment, we can't afford to seal anything, you know, so we can't afford the money. So if actually we create an environment that allows more flexibility for people in a council's road to apply to have their road sealed, we could potentially have a good demand. We could have a significant demand on available sources that we don't have. Now, so the principle is actually, I think that it's neat that communities can have this option and want to do it. I think that we have to look at our finances first to see is that if this comes up and you had any number of them, and I don't know how many private seal jobs have been done in the past. I imagine very, very, very few. But or none. Well, I think that there's, you know, as we know, that there's one about to happen. But if there's none happen, maybe that's the answer. It won't change anything. But I think that, I guess I'm coming from just looking at what we know at the moment of what money we do have. And if we created a demand, have we got the capacity to, deliver on it?
I'd like to echo what Wayne Brown constantly talks about: smarter, faster, cheaper. With the funds that you have, the problem we've got, no private participants have been able to get the threshold passed to get there. I mean, I have to mention one in Mangawai where they were very close to it, and they had the ability to actually top it up on behalf of one of the other residents, and they still went and didn't get their road metalled, and it's still unsealed, sorry. So, you know, like a mixture of strategies in terms of doing things smarter. You've got this heavy metalling that goes on metal roads where, you know, for example, we had this discussion about Page Green, which I still don't understand exactly what it is, but if you're going to be putting a product on a road, you want to make sure that the ability is to actually take that product later on and seal on top of it. And so we have to strategize so that we have our roads in a condition where they are cheaper to actually complete and seal. So there's opportunities there to use the existing maintenance of our roads to actually get the road to a point where it is a pretty cheaper or much cheaper option for the private participants to contribute to the sealing, because the sealing part's the part that's not subsidised currently. So yeah, I think we need to have a really good look at making that threshold a little bit easier to pass. Why have a policy if no one can make it work? Councillor Nair?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, I also echo the sentiment whereby the full contribution is by the people involved. But I was just looking at the letter written to Lifestyle in 2012 by the commissioners. And they said the Kaipara District Council has a history of poor planning and budgeting. So I would not like to involve council in any way in such projects, either by debt or by contribution or prospective contribution. The state of roads in rest of Kaipara is the level of service is so poor. And we are extending our strategy to private road sealing while we have not delivered on our public roads. Yeah. So my direction is as it is. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else would like to put, I think we've taken this around the table. Anyone else like to make a comment? Councillor Erin Wilson.
I feel like I should speak, so I'm the only one that hasn't so far, but I'm also aware that we're over time, so I'll be as brief as possible. I suppose in a nutshell, I agree that it would be great to relook at this sealing policy. I think that it's correct that no one has been able to meet the threshold, and therefore, we've got residents who are really struggling with, dust pollution and all sorts of issues. I don't think we've solved any of the problems with the policy today, although I appreciate everyone's comments. I guess we're gonna I assume if we want staff to look at it, they would come back with.
Is that a question?
It's a question. Would they come back with?
So through you, Mr Mayor, yeah. So what I think we need to do here, I mean, there's general reflection that current policy is not fit for purpose in its current state, and that's what the report says. So I think we need to rescind that in the first instance, but then we need to come back to you with possible options about a future policy. And that's kind of what I'm hearing around the table as far as future direction goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's a 75% threshold.
Sorry, can I just quickly give my direction? Because I heard a lot of direction around the table today.
Yeah, councillor Paniora, come in.
Thank you. So I'm not completely against or opposed to this policy. I do see the benefits in the future. I think that there is a way that we can make it work and balance it out if we do actually have some actual amounts in there. So, you know, say for example, if we said that it could be up to $10,000 that council could require of, you know, of the residents, that during the application process, council considers whether the road is a road that needs to be sealed and is on the list of roads to be sealed, but the funding isn't there, because I think it's counterproductive for us to have a lot of owners of roads that are well-to-do and have the money, and then time and time again those projects get put ahead of projects that we actually need done in the district, but we don't have the money for. And if we could, during the application process, actually tease out whether there are, that 25% that I've talked about, that are completely against it, and, where there's likely to be judicial reviews, which is going to cost the district money if those applications are put on hold, or things like that, so that we don't get ourselves into a situation where we're in court over the roads and then it doesn't get anywhere. But yeah, so not completely against it, but I'd like for the staff to do a little bit of work around it as well and bring it back to us. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else like to have a say there? Okay.
One last one. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that the interesting scenario is we've got a 75% threshold at the moment that for one reason or another doesn't seem to work. And we're talked, and there's the threats about judicial reviews, etc. If you bring it down, which potentially allows greater engagement and involvement and option, perhaps you could argue that the threat of judicial review increases. I think that whilst I acknowledge what I said up front, I think that one of the big things is that let's set a threshold that actually is reasonable, and maybe 75 is too high. But actually, I still go back and say, we've got to look at our own budgets, actually, for the potential for this to happen, because we certainly don't want to be making the majority or a lot more of our ratepayers suffer for not getting sealing or not getting work done on their roads because money is deviated to this purpose, as well justified and good ideas as it may be.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Shireen.
You're welcome.
And we'll move on to the next topic here. Okay, Unama Waste Management and Minimisation Plan, 224, 2027.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll take elected members through my paper. Just for clarity on a number of things, there was concerns raised about legislation and whether we were compliant or not. So just doing a bit of scene setting. Under the Waste Management Minimisation Plan, we had to under the Waste Minimisation Act 2008, we had to develop and adopt a waste minimisation plan, which we did in November. And that plan sets out a whole lot of activities and the process by which we would implement those activities. Through the LTP consultation and at the last briefing, there was clear direction given that a district-wide rate would not be, wouldn't have the appetite for that, and we were to go away and look at developing a targeted rate. Just in terms of, coming back to the strategies, the Waste Minimisation actually does allow for us to amend the strategy that was adopted under the provisions of the Local Government Act. And what we are intending to do as a result of that direction is use the LTP consultation process to amend direction to the general public in terms of what we're doing with the waste minimisation plan. Now, we did go away and explore whether we could develop a targeted rate, and the paper sort of sets out the reasons that we can't in this time period. It does require a lot of cleansing of data for us to then identify those properties that would be take up the service, and then apply an appropriate rate to cover the cost of those services. So we are saying that we want to use a period of time to cleanse the data, and then proceed with, I guess, the implementation in the next LTP. So the paper clearly sets that out. As a result of that, there's some changes to the financials that is set out in the paper, and Sue has included those with her financial paper as well. That sort of concludes my paper, Mr. Mayor. It has been circulated to elected members prior to this meeting. The general feedback that I have received from those that gave me comment was that the recommendations as set out in the way forward be accepted.
Any questions, Ivana? Councillor Aaron Lawson, Collins.
Thank you. Can you just explain, in case I missed it, sorry, the change in the budget, what would that $506,000 be for?
It's just the general collection of rubbish that we do today. So in years 1, we had 506, and 2, we had 506. And then there was a step change to go to bins.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just adjusting it back to its usual amount. Okay, cool. So,
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Lambert.
So just to confirm it, the 2.5 million is the purchase of the bins and getting them going, is that correct?
Yeah.
That,
the collection, the collection of the waste.
my calculations, that works around about $30 a head per ratepayer, is that correct?
On the 2.5 or on the 506?
Yeah. Well, it'll be the 3 million over 2 years, over 3 years.
Simple maths, if you do that, yeah, if there's $30 in it, that is $30.
And yet we've got a private company in town who will collect the bins for $25 user pays. I'm just trying to work out the sense of it all. Sorry, I'm just.
it's gone, so don't worry about it.
We're saying we're maintaining status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was my direction was to continue with the status quo, because otherwise it's another cost we're going to land on our ratepayers, and quite frankly, I think the system we've got available now works. No matter what system you have, it's about participation too. But you can have bins in the garage full of your tools and stuff, not use them to put out your recycling if you're not in the frame of mind to use them. So that's my direction. The status quo is very much what I want to see at this point. Councillor Mayer?
Just a query, I mean, I agree with what you say, but why did we provide 2.5 million? Is it like we were actually buying those bins?
It's a combination of there's some capex and then there's ongoing opex as well. So the sum of all the money you see in the capital component and the operational component, one is to establish the contract, and then there's the cost of the service.
I'm just need more clarification. Councillor Lambert made this similar point. It's a private company. And why we would have any capex or opex?
Can I think Sue's got her hand up here.
Just to clarify about the information, the 2 million, at the moment, the private contractor is getting his money from the bags, the recycling bags. When that disappears in his bins, it's not getting that money, so then the council has to bear the cost and put. That's why the money is put into our accounts as a cost, and we're charging it out through, proposing to charge it out through a rate. Does that make sense then?
Kind of, but not very sure about it, because unless you are providing the service from the council point of view, rather using just like Auckland, like 200 a year or something, then I can justify something like that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we had this conversation at the last briefing, and we got to a point where we said we're not going to apply a general rate. We would go away and explore a targeted rate. My paper sets out that in order for us to do that, that's going to take us a little bit of time. And therefore, we want to do it and get it right. It is quite a big GIS exercise. And therefore, we want to maintain status quo. So in the LTP is not 2.5 million. What is in the LTP is the services that we provide today will continue for the next 3 years.
Yeah. All right. No, it's good. It should be taken out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. Alan, I think I raised it with you before. We'll obviously have a write-up on the waste minimisation in the LTP. Can we just provide context around the fact that the yellow bags are also recyclable?
Yes, I did pass it on to Ruby, and we were looking to put that in.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people don't realise that it's actually completely recycled, even the bags. So, thank you.
Questions or commentary before we move on? Thank you, Alan. All good? Okay. Next on our agenda, item 3, long-term plan development contributions policy update. Welcome, Sue.
Good morning. Just change the slide. Okay. Development contributions are about capturing the costs of growth and charging them to developers. And generally, we charge for roading. We've now got a new library charge, and we charge for wastewater where there's growth, and specifically, historically, that's been the Mangawhai wastewater scheme. And so this policy is about growth and how it's paid for, but it's more complicated this time. And and the reason it's far more complicated is just before Christmas, we got word from the government that they were changing legislation, and we were bringing back into our equation 3 waters. And you can see in the attachment A, I gave you, go to that first, is the capital projects that have been put in. And you'll understand when we were doing the first 3 years that we pushed some out because it was unaffordable. And now I've got the next 7 years from the GM infrastructure that is still unaffordable. So I'm at the stage where I've got some things to discuss with you today, but I'm going to propose that we look at just adopting our current development contributions, because it's going to be, there's actually going to have to be a long conversation about what are we going to pay for in the future. Because so normally you do your development contributions based on your 10-year plan. This new 10-year plan with the last 7 years, you know that Arnon had told the DIA that there was going to be 600 million, I think it was, in Three Waters expenditure. So you can see in the last 7 years, the first 3 years shows 3 million in costs, 10 million, and I've added roading in as well. But then we get to year 4 and you're talking about 35 million, 25 million, 39 million. Those costs we can't afford, council. So I can't put them in my development contribution policy unless we're actually committed to spending those amounts, and it would push us over our debt levels. So I think we need to have further conversations. So I think there's a real issue there that I can't bring in the capital at this stage, and that we need to bring it back to you as a council to have that discussion. That's the first area for discussion. The other area that I know that we have proposed, just go.
Can I ask on this or later?
I'll just later, wait.
So the other things I want to discuss with you were really to do with remissions. The policy allows for remissions for schools, charitable organisations, and I wanted to add to this first response, proposing to add to that first response emergency operations, because we've had those applications in the past, and I just wanted to highlight to you the other issue is that the council, it has been the practice to put 50% of the interest costs onto the development of the existing users, and that's been a past council decision that we've carried out. So my proposal is I've altered the development contributions slightly, the policy itself, not much change, but I'm thinking if you're in agreement with the remissions and you're still happy with the 50% of the interest going to existing users, and the reason that the council did that was the interest was getting too high and just adding it to the development contribution amount. That was my understanding. It was done well before I came to council. And then I was going to put the current development contributions amount plus the current list, and then proposing that through this next year, that basically we start next month and we look at the capital projects. We start and we look historically at some of the projects we've got in there and make sure they've still got the capacity in them, which most of them still will have, but there will be some where we might have replaced them. So that's my proposal for going forward. When I've looked at this, it's been, a lot more complicated than I thought it would be, and especially when I was faced with the capital amounts that were proposed to be spending on Three Waters.
Okay, any questions? Let's see. Councillor Larson, Councillor Mayer, Councillor Lambert.
Thanks, Sue. Could you just take us through the actual DC figures and talk us through them?
You mean the capital?
The payments that ratepayers make as development contributions. See.
It'd be the same as last year. I don't think I've got that in front of me.
In the policy though, is it not?
Policy.
Yeah, oh, it might be in the policy, sorry. Yeah, right page. Okay, very good. Yeah, they're still in there. Okay, so that's on under 2.9, and we've got Mangawhai, Dargaville. So basically we've got stormwater, wastewater treatment, water supply, roading, and community, which is the library. So which one did you want to talk about?
So in the policy, as we've discussed through briefings, told us that the Roading East policy was not a duplication of the payment made by Kaiwaka and Mangawhai. However, in the chart, you're still showing Roading East in the map, showing the whole of the Kaipara East area, including Mangawhai and Kaiwaka. You're also stipulating a DC for roading for both Kaiwaka and Mangawhai, which then makes them more than double the amount.
So I'll make sure that it's clear that there is $90 for every property, which is just general roading, and then the balance, there's another charge for I think is the area between Kaiwaka and Mangawhai, is that?
It's Roading East.
So you've got a map in your policy which shows that whole Kaipara East area. And that's what Roading East applies to, presumably, which is an amount of $2,337. But then as a subset of that area, you also specify a development contribution for roading for Kaiwaka and Mangawhai of $2,427, which by any basic reading indicates that they're paying both. But say somewhere that they're not paying both?
No, I'll get that in the, okay, so you want that clarified so that they're not paying.
Through this, previously I raised this and I was told it was both. Then when it came to briefing this time, I was told it wasn't both. And now it still reads as if it is both.
Okay, I'll sort out the roading.
I assume it isn't supposed to be both.
No, it should just say roading and then $90. And on top of that, and there shouldn't be anything against Kaiwaka or Mangawhai.
Well, the community side.
But what I think it should say is if you're going to have 2,337 for Roading East, then any of those towns, whether it's Mangatoroto, Paparoa, Ruawai, Mangawhai, Kaiwaka or whatever, they should be paying 2,337. They shouldn't then also be paying 90 or 2,127 for that matter. So maybe this Roading East thing is complicating it. I don't know.
It definitely is complicating it, and that's why I'm suggesting that I start all over again, because I wouldn't do it the way it was done. But the normal roading actually includes some roads from the Kaiwaka Mangawhai area as well. And I don't quite understand why that is, but it's only $90. But you're right, it needs to be clarified and
well, it shouldn't them if they're already paying a Roading East development contribution covering the same area as per your map for $2,337.
So when you look at the projects that are in those, there are some that have been historically put in there that relate to Mangawhai. So what I'm suggesting is keep the same, but I'll clarify what you're saying. So we don't want people paying 2,427 plus another 90. But what, and we'll look at over the next period of looking at historically how things have been calculated. Do they still have capacity? And also what's the growth costs going forward that the council is actually going to be prepared to incur?
Well, I think the message is clear, but if you look at Appendix 1, which has got the map attached to it, which is on page 28 of the policy, there isn't any differentiation. The Roading East area covers both Mangawhai and Kaiwaka. Doesn't say that they only pay once.
Okay, I'll sort that out.
Yeah, so through you, Mr Mayor, so Sue's going to clarify that point.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whilst you mentioned that the water thing, you will need more information and back to us. Wouldn't it be possible or wise for us to take the, I think there are about 20 millions proposed up to first 3 years. That figure can be pushed out to year 4. So if you look at there are 2 there mostly in Mangawhai, I think it is a little bit of in Dargaville, but that figure is going to affect the rates if you put in the LTP for the first 3 years. And the rating figure is unnecessarily being, hampered, disadvantaged by this exercise. It's not going to happen in the first 3 years. So when you do that exercise and bring it back to us, maybe it's worthwhile to look at that figures.
Yes, we'll be bringing back all the figures for council to consider.
Thank you. And just if I can finish it off, 50% of interest costs and development date, or I think it's 40 million or something like that on which it is charged. And even if I use a very perfunctory basic rate of 5%, we are looking at 200,000 a year on that. And you said the previous council said charge to existing users. It's a past council decision. Are the people happy with it, the way it's going, or what's?
Just to clarify, the DC debt is $26 million, or it was recorded as at the 30th of June 23.
Yeah.
So that's all. There's not 40 million but relating to DC debt, relating to the DCs. There's other debt, because I gave you in the questions that I gave you in the next part, you can see how the debt is made up, and it's made up of a number of different items, not just Mangawhai wastewater. But Mangawhai wastewater is the biggest.
Yeah, but all the water thing, we should push it to the year 4. That's what my position is. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lambeth.
Yes, thank you, through me. I see the potential changes. Remissions, schools travel orders, provide first emergency response operations. Are they all new that they're going to get remissions, or do they already get them?
No, first response emergency operations isn't mentioned, but the rest are mentioned under the policy.
Okay, so when we're talking about first response, just make it clear that when we give them remissions, it's got to be made up somewhere else in the balance, doesn't it?
That's right.
Yes. So first emergency, are we talking about police, ambulance and fire are going to get them?
That's correct.
And they're a government department, so we're going to wear the cost of a government department.
That's correct. That's in the policy, and it's been in the policy. Well, no, that hasn't been in the policy, but when I brought it to council the last time, when they came to us and asked for remission, I brought that to council because it wasn't mentioned in the policy, and the council agreed to 50% remission.
Yeah, I have major concerns about that when we go down that track. Schools are funded by the Education Board to pay the rates.
This is not paying rates.
Sorry?
This is not about paying rates.
Okay. But it's,
This is like if there was a new school that was going to be established, and there's talk of a new school being established, there's a question of whether that might trigger the requirement for a development contribution, and that policy remission provision says that they wouldn't need to pay it. Or if we had a new fire station or a new ambulance station.
okay. I think we're all pulled up with that. So there's only going to be a school. So, okay.
But the first response is new. So I'm looking for, if you're fine with that as well.
Councillor Williams.
I just had a,
Oh, look, I'm sorry, my apologies. Councillor Paniora was first on my list there. Councillor Paniora.
Yeah, I just wanted to give some direction, and I think that those are all fine. Yeah, given their we're talking about development contributions, and we support obviously development, especially in these key areas. But whilst we have kind of talked about remissions, it reminds me that I requested from Sue a list of all of the remissions that we give the district, and I was hugely shocked by the concessions that charitable organisations were getting. So I think that we need to perhaps have a look at that. Obviously it's, I diverge, but if we're looking at getting some, extra revenue, then we should be, looking at that as well. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Williams.
Through the chair. So I sent through an earlier question, just for clarification. So the current outstanding debt for the Mangawhai wastewater system is factored into the Mangawhai development contributions for wastewater?
That's right. And that's what development contribution balance is, it's the debt.
Okay, and so how are we paying down that debt? So we've still, that debt has remained at the same kind of benchmark for a long time. So is there a plan? I don't understand how we're ever going to pay it off.
So development is still slow for connections to the wastewater scheme, but they're basically paid. We do get about up to $2 million a year in development contributions, anything between about 1 million to 2 million maximum. And then there's interest put on each year. So you're right, it has remained the same because development hasn't been as fast as we had anticipated. Whereas development in the district is actually quite a lot, but in the Mangawhai wastewater area, not quite as great.
And just following on from that, so if we don't upgrade this policy in the LTP to have higher amounts that developers are paying, we not then relook at it again until the next LTP process? So we'd have 3 years where that would remain the same amounts that we're collecting?
So through the chair, no, we can do that annually. It would still have to go to consultation. So that's why I'm suggesting it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who have we got next time on is councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So I'm just wondering here whether we're between a hard place and a very dark hole. If you are advocating that we don't change these DCs, one, because we can't afford stuff further out, but we know that we're having growth, right? We know that we're having growth. We're all sorts of things happening. Surely we are mortgaging ourselves to a bigger, darker hole than the 26 million that debt that we currently have just from the Mangawhai project. I just, with, I know that the difficulty is, as you say, we can't afford things, right? And we know that. And so if you don't have them in there, in the plan, you can't account for them in the DCs. Somehow or another, we've got to bring in the reality of what life is going to be. And, we don't want ratepayers, we've said it many times, we do not want ratepayers paying for growth in any way. So it's got to be done in such a way that the developers, the development contributions are realistic to what is coming. And I guess that's a conundrum because you can only put in so much there. So I'm certainly not going to advocate for pushing stuff out. I mean, I've said it before, for 3 or 4 years, we've got to actually, to sustain our growth across the district, we've got to have relevant amounts of money that that developers will pay to ensure that growth can happen in a meaningful manner without contribution from ratepayers. So, I mean, I don't know what the exact answer is, and maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me that we've got to understand everything possible that could be in there. And, even if some of it is in the 10th year of the LTP, so it's there. So we've got absolute maximum outtake from our DCs and our roading contributions. I mean, why would we leave a $90 contribution in there for roading for Dargaville area and things like that, you know, I mean, it's not going to go anywhere if indeed it is needed.
So that's what the proposal is to look at the capital, but at the moment, you can see the dilemma I'm in. 30 foot, if we're proposing that at the end of year 3, we have 73 million in debt, our maximum is 100 million, we'll get to year 4, then the spending. And that, so council hasn't discussed what it's prepared to do, what it can do, and and I can't put amounts in that we're not going to spend. And it's not, the budget there is not realistic for the small council. And, you know, that's what we did for year 1, 2 and 3. We kicked the can out to year 4. And now when I've come to the development contributions and I looked at that and I got quite a shock. And I know we've seen them before because we saw larger figures go to the DIA. So that's what I'm.
I guess that's exactly the point that I'm coming to. You know, you're in that invidious position. So I mean, the only thing, and it's pipe dreaming probably, but again, it's another example that we have to take. And I know that various of our team are meeting with the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure in the near future. I mean, this is an impossible situation, and you know, I think that all it's doing, to my mind, is heading us down a track of mortgaging ourselves, our future, right now, by not being able to be in a position to account for it. And you know, I mean, it's just a travesty.
Thank you, Councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just with regard to the remissions proposal, with remissions or the like, every time you allow one, you are requiring the others to subsidise the difference. So everyone else ends up paying more. I think that we should have provision for remissions in there. And you've got a list of these that can qualify for remissions, but there should be some discretion around that, whereby an application can be made for remission, and then a decision of council is made whether to allow it or not. Otherwise, the sort of rules around charitable status and stuff are inclined to get a bit stretched sometimes, and we could end up having a whole lot of costs for people that quite frankly could easily pay for themselves. And that include the Ministry of Education, who may not be well funded, they may be a lot better funded than we are. And so what we end up doing is ending up with even more debt for our ratepayers that can't be covered by every time we let someone not pay, everyone else is paying more over a longer period of time. So that would be my direction on remissions. Allow them. You've got a list, but it's at the discretion of requires approval of council.
So can I just clarify, because at the moment, the chief executive approves it because they're in there, but you'd like me to put that it actually comes to a council meeting.
That's only my opinion, but I think that gives a governance level of control. I haven't finished saying what I want to say, if I can.
Carry through.
As far as the level of DCs is concerned, I'm still not convinced simple carryover of the previous figures is appropriate. And so from a starting point, I go to roading. We have a program of future roading. We know how much we're allocating to that in terms of the impacts of growth versus the current population. And I don't understand how we are simply rolling those figures over without sense checking them. I fully accept that the roading development contribution for lower growth areas, and you know, there's a list of them there. There's even one called district, which must be everyone other than the high growth areas and the other low growth areas. I'm not sure what that even means, but maybe it is only $90 because there's not much growth and we can't attribute it to growth if there isn't any. But just to arbitrarily go, it's exactly the same as it used to be, given that we're approving a works program and that works program is fundable. Why we aren't actually doing the calculation for them. Then I go to wastewater, and the argument that's been advanced is that, well, we can't change it because after year 3 the proposal is unaffordable. Well, surely we can make a calculation on the amount that is affordable and increase it on that basis, rather than saying we won't increase it at all because what we've got on there is unaffordable. So I just put that up there for consideration. I also think that when we go out and say, we've got $600 million to fund and we can't fund it, well, it's based on a whole lot of assumptions, and those assumptions are that we do the absolute gold-plated first world standard for everything everywhere, and that comes out at $600 million. Well, there is no consideration of the ability to pay, and certainly of the ability to pay without external subsidy. So it's all a little bit hypothetical, really, when we look at numbers. And I'm not really going anywhere with that, but actually we're doing okay with what we've got. It might not be perfect, and maybe we have to find some middle ground rather than just having very, very high levels dictated to us that we simply can't afford. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vincent.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, seems to me we are on a knife edge with the development contribution policy. I mean, this council, I think, philosophically has a growth mindset, facilitating growth, and development contributions can be seen as a barrier to that. And there are some discretions in the policy, and this one I want to focus on is the ability for deferring payment. And this, like, the policy sets out the triggers for when the obligation arises and when it's invoiced and when it must be paid before the next thing in the development can happen. And I just wonder if with allowing that discretion for deferring it, at what point, I think the policy says something about if it's any, that discretion is exercised under such terms as the council may require. Is there a provision in there to allow the amount to be adjusted for inflation, say in the cost construction index or some such? Or is it just that, okay, they have to pay $1,000, that's the invoice amount, but we'll give you 3 years to pay, and in 3 years' time, that $1,000 is only going to buy you $600 worth of work? Or is it that we can adjust the amount payable as a result of the deferral?
So through the chair, when we defer, and we have deferred because some developers have found it difficult, say 4 years ago, a couple of them, and we have one at the moment. We have a statutory land charge, and it also has an interest rate on them. So because they actually take off the statutory land charges on all the sections, but sometimes they can sell 1 or 2 sections up front. So we take the statutory land charge off that, work out how much they owe us on top of the development.
Is that interest rate like realistic in relation to inflation construction costs as opposed to just the bank interest rate, or?
Well, it is an interest rate we're charging, not we're
is it like 5% or is it?
6%.
Yeah, which isn't, and we've had a 42% increase in construction costs in the last 3 years. So there's something wrong with that equation.
So we're only trying to get back the interest that's being charged to us. If you want to charge the customers more, they won't come to us. We're trying to facilitate development. And by doing that, that's why we're helping people defer payment to us. We put a statutory land charge. We're charging interest.
It is going to cost us to do that, by the sound of things.
But it does. It costs us the interest, because we're,
Difference in the interest rate return and the actual inflation cost of carrying it.
no, I don't agree. It's just the interest cost. Different, it's because it's costing us. We've like become a lender, or I think the council is getting adequate compensation. We don't have too many developers flocking, so we're not doing it too cheap. And and that changes depending, the amount of interest changes, but, and we're not making it too harsh that, because there are some developers approaching us.
Yep, okay, thank you.
Councillor Paniora.
Thank you. I just wanted to make the comment that if councillors think that we'll retrospectively be applying development contributions to, I don't know, schools that have already got resource consents, then they're dreaming.
I don't understand that, but. Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me paint a scenario to what I said a little bit earlier. We have in the schedule $64.5 million for Dargaville wastewater. Right now, Dargaville wastewater contributes $1,887. Now, you've said that we're not going to change things. Right? Now, how on earth could we not change that wastewater contribution for Dargaville at the minimum? Right now, it is going to take 34,000 contributions to pay that 64.5 million that we have actually in the budget. So, I don't understand how we can be saying, and I understand you may have said it as a general rule, but that is an example. There is something specific in the budget. I keep saying we are mortgaging the future of this place, and that, if we don't change that one alone, away is a major indictment on the community over there.
So through the chair, this is the first LTP that there's ever been a mention of Dargaville wastewater. Prior to that, there wasn't. It wasn't on anyone's horizon. In infrastructure, it's now been pointed out we need that. Our development in Dargaville would be 2 houses a year at most. So all I'm suggesting is let's get it correct and let's do it in a year. So we'll sort it out by then. And that's what, I know, I understand what you're saying, but we're not getting that the development's not occurring in Dargaville at the moment.
Well, so I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, the other thing is that you're saying then that the council is just going to pay 64 million for that and have no.
No, what I'm saying is, as a council, you want to question what is the 64 million building, because I've got no idea.
Oh. No. You did right as far as that goes, but I'm using the example of you saying that, there's not going to be any changes. I mean, that's a perfect example. Whether the figure's right or not, whether it's 30 million or not, there is something required, and we've actually heard about it for some time, that there is something required for Dargaville wastewater. It has to be covered in contributions.
Yeah, and there might be depreciation reserves contributions.
To get the asset.
Okay, Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, we're going around and around. I think there are two issues. One is, should we change the policy? And I see a lot of, I think you made an amendment, page 66, and you have started off why we have this policy. There's a line through it. And I would not like to take away the reasoning of why we have the policy. I think it's a good policy, and we have it for funding the present and the future, as Councillor Howard mentioned, or possible infrastructure growth. So that's one point. We need to have an increase, not insurmountable kind of thing, but something which is logical in line with growth in Dargaville and Mangawhai. That's one point. The second point, which I always keep referring to, is we are going way late by looking at projects like stormwater, all those water projects, push them out of this LTP for fourth year. They are there. They give a picture of how much increase, inflation adjusted, because you also took off the financial contribution part. I don't know why, because that's an important part as well. So development contribution, financial contribution have to be inflation adjusted. That's the policy says, and you have put a line through that. So I would like to keep them there. They are very logical explanation of having those items there. The only thing we have to focus on how much we should increase, and that has to be logical too. So if the three waters, and it is a certainty, whether it's coming in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, it should be pushed out, those projects, and there has to be a logical number, and Councillor Howard is right, and you are right, 65 million out of nowhere. So for this discussion, what we're trying to find out is a right rate for the ratepayers, which is affordable. So let's focus on, this is the logical principle thing. Yes, it has to go in big. And in terms of the amounts, we should not play around on something which is happening in future and we don't know about. Yeah, that's my direction.
That's what planning's all about.
Aaron Wilson Collins.
Alan wanted for me.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Mayor, just for clarification. I did set out through various LTP briefings that, you know, in the first 3 years of our entity AM was something like $150 million. Now we're down to 32. And so we do run the risk of, if we continue to move things out, at some stage we need to fund, right? The $64 million is not a number picked out of the air. In Dargaville, we've got a pond. And so, you know, with growth, we want to modernize that infrastructure to a treatment plant, basically. And we've got the same problem in Te Kupuru. You know, we've got a pond. Now, we know that there are some issues with that pond. And the only way to address that issue is to take the pond offline. But in order for us to do that, we need a treatment plant. So all of these assets that we have need to be modernized. Now, we don't gold plate either. You know, we try and strip out as much as we can, and the Indents system in Mangawhai is a classic example. You know, for $400,000, we've improved the capacity of that plant without spending $10 million on a membrane, an MBR. So, you know, we are being prudent with our cash, but, you know, we do still need to invest in this 3-year cycle in the wastewater.
And you can see from the amount that the GM infrastructure has given, it was 600,000 that went to the DIA, but it's only 187,000.
600 million.
600 million, yeah, that went to the DIA, and it's 187 million here. Yeah.
So if I may kind of reply to your thing in a way that we don't have to spend, we don't have to provide for this figure. I don't know why we are trying to collect rates on the projects which we may not be funding. It's a 100% guarantee, and it's in the media, that is being funded by debt. It is not to be funded by the ratepayers. And it may be that we have to join 2-3 councils to have all those projects funded. So, I mean, we are not in control. Let's accept it.
I think there's two issues here, Councillor. One is the upkeep of our existing assets, and
no, we're talking about future assets.
No, we are talking about both, essentially, because we've got a commitment to either maintain or retrofit or improve, such as what Alan was saying. And then we've got the prospect, hopefully, of several hundred sections becoming available in Dargaville, where development contributions will become available with the advent of those sections. So there's two things going on here for the future. And so in the meantime, we've got to decide what we can afford to fund and keep working now. And then we have to find where we're happy with how we take development contributions going going forward. I'll move on to the next question, Erin Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to clarify, because I think you've answered my first question. So, and just making sure I've got this correct. What you're suggesting is for this year, we keep the development contributions as they are, because there's not enough time to do the work that needs to be done to make the meaningful change. And then at the next annual plan, we would need to work, by then we would have done the work to make sure from there, moving forward from there, we would have development contributions that possibly have taken in all the concerns that the councillors have with what projects are actually in there, what the costs actually will be, et cetera, to plan for and be prepared for that growth.
And looking at the past ones as well, to look at the capacity and make sure it's there.
Right.
Okay, so that's, yeah, because I think this is worth discussion, this paper is worth discussion by the councillors before, and so I would hope that we could actually start this like in a couple of months,
Right.
not leave it to the end.
Yeah.
Let's get it.
But by then,
Yes.
then we would have it sorted. And then my next question is just to clarify the purpose of development contributions, because I don't know if there's a confusion about that, because infrastructure would need replacing eventually regardless of growth. Is that correct?
Yes. It's renewals going.
Yes.
Yeah.
So development contributions in of themselves are not the only funding source to replace infrastructure.
That's correct. We have depreciation reserves, which we fully fund.
So 60
Depreciation.
million dollars, $64.5 million divided by 38,000 development contributions is irrelevant. Thank you. And then the my last question, sorry, just I wanted to give my opinion on the remissions that list there. Yeah, so I don't agree that that should be a decision of council. I think they're either in the policy or they're not, and that should be a decision that the council can make when it comes to council to adopt the policy. I don't think it's I don't think council discretion should be required. I think that's territory we shouldn't be involved in. People either, like the organisations, either meet the criteria in the remissions policy or they don't, and it should be that clear cut. So the remissions themselves should lay that out as council wants it. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Larson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think there's still some confusion around some of these matters, and so, you know, understand, for example, for Dargable, there's been plan changes, there's been no application for subdivision, therefore we can't say there's development demand to calculate what would be necessarily a development contribution for stormwater greater than what we're currently showing. However, I think it would help everyone around the table. Some people might not want to take advantage of it, but if we actually saw the maths, so we have a schedule of work that we're proposing, which has got numbers around it. We have growth assumptions around all of that, and those numbers are fed into a calculation. If we actually saw the maths, we might go, okay, we agree, it hasn't changed. But I haven't seen the maths, and I don't understand how it hasn't changed, and I don't understand how it can be asserted that there has been no time to do it when, since the beginning of this LTP process, not just myself, but Councillor Williams and others have been asking for this information, and then 1 week before we get to the draft LTP adoption, we get a draft policy and still no calculations that we can see. So my suggestion is, let's open the books, let's see the calculations, and then the whole thing might be resolved and we might go, we agree, it is as it is. But at the same time, we still do need to review it next year through our annual plan round. I don't see any reason why there hasn't been time to do the calculations now, or how we can really even go out with something on the calculation. You.
Through the chair, in the past, we've had consultants do the calculations. This is the first year that really we've taken ownership, and as well as that, I've had a turnover in finance department. So I'm bringing them up to speed. And I've been doing a lot of other policies, and we've been doing lots of choices in those for council.
I think through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's fair to say, noting your comments, Councillor Larson, but yeah, look, you know, the organisation is under the pump to get this stuff done. And then just noting Sue's comments in that space. I think it would be, I get the data, you need the information, I get that. It would be good if we could push through and do as Sue's suggesting here, and really make a concerted effort over the next couple of months to get the policy right and do it properly, and make the tweaks that Sue's suggesting and Councillor Larson. Councillor.
Can I just comment again?
Yeah.
That both the General Manager of Infrastructure and myself have only known that Three Waters is going to be in since December. So we didn't even think we were going to have to look at development contributions for that.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's been a challenge.
Yeah, Councillor Mark Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first point, I think, has been addressed by yourself and Councillor Aaron as well regarding, say, a theoretical scenario of a community wastewater scheme where there was zero growth, in time would need renewal, and that would have nothing to do with the development contributions policy. So we've got that point clarified. So that's good. The concern I have about going with just carrying on with what we've got is the need for coherence between the DC policy and the long-term plan, because I think they need to be able to be seen to relate to each other. Otherwise, be concerned about the potential for legal challenge of the validity of one or the other document. I guess it would be mainly perhaps from someone who was up for paying a massive development contribution and saying, well, that's, I can't see where that comes from in relation to the district plan, to the long-term plan. So I can't say I fully appreciate, because I don't know, and I really don't want to know the problems going on behind the front door of the council, because that's not for me to be involved in. But I would appreciate some reassurance that our exposure to legal challenge is covered if we do a once over lightly with our development contributions policy. Yes.
So what I'm proposing is the current dollar amounts, which is there's no issue with.
But which would have been valid for the 21-31 long-term plan, but are they valid for the 24-34 24-27 long-term plan, I guess?
It's because they're the projects that we've got into in the last long-term plan, and there really hasn't been that much change in this next 3 years from what we itemised. Basically, the wastewater was still got that in our work plan.
Because I suppose that's focused on my concerns, and if I could have some reassurance on that, or if there's going to be a legal check on that point, that would give me greater reassurance.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 3 quick points. Firstly, to Councillor Nayer's suggestion of continuing to push things back, I'd like to record that. I think that we've seen from both of you that there has been an enormous pushback already. And let's forget the 600 million that was talked about. Let's talk about the 493 million, and it's down to 187 million. So, you know, there's been an awful lot of pushback already to try to get, as I see it, things in. I don't want to see anything else push back. And, you know, I'd be much more comfortable about having stuff in, because I just have the sense that we're underscoring what we're going to have to deliver. And I know that there's a financial constraint, and I know that the big elephant in the room is what will happen with the new Three Waters, and we can't answer that. So we've got to take it as best we can. And I think that we've got to push as hard as we can to make sure that we've got stuff covered. I think that on the other point I'd make is that, and we talked about, and I raised the Dargaville wastewater, the 64 million, and as Anand, you've said, it's a new plant, it's new equipment. There ain't no depreciation from a pond in a hole in the ground. So there is nothing to cover the cost of a brand new plant. So let's not go kidding ourselves that depreciation reserves will cover anything of the cost of a whole new facility.
It should have.
Well, you've only got a hole in the ground. That's my point is that you don't have an infrastructure. I think that's 2 points. It's a difficult situation. Last point is, Sue, please, to you, are you saying now, for clarity, that the 24,712 Mangawhai wastewater treatment DC is what is going to remain?
For this coming year, that's what I'm proposing.
Just for this year?
Yes, and we'll come to you straight away with capital projects, look at that, so that you understand what's being proposed in the, and is it affordable?
So
how we're going to fund it.
So to clarify on that one, so we've got plan changes happening. We're hearing two in the next 2-3 months, something like that. If they happen to go through, and there was, 1,000 sections involved, and a developer wanted to go ahead and prepay, they would pay on the basis of the 24,000.
So what happens is that they don't put forward a plan for the whole 1,000 sections. Developers do it by stages.
Yep.
So that's how they pay, is by stages. And it's when the consent, when they apply for the consent for that stage.
Okay.
Yeah, understand that process. Yeah, okay, all right, I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Williams, followed by Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Through the Chair. I guess I concur with what Councillor Larson has said about, we've been asking since the LTP process started on this, because we realise you can only change it in an LTP cycle, or then now in an anti-done cycle. The point I want to make is that for a few years we've realised that the DCs for the Mangawhai wastewater have not been set at a high enough level to let alone cover the debt or any upgrades that are needed. So, this is really important, and I would have thought that we would have had more to go on in upgrading these policies. So that's just where I'm at with it.
Councillor Nair.
We can go on and on about these discussions, but if you just look at the inflation adjustment, so everything you are putting 50% inflation adjusted in all those millions of dollars, and the development contribution is a figure you don't want to adjust and you want to keep it. I don't see any logic in that. So it has to, anything infrastructure growth, whether it's 6 million or 65 million, is gonna come at a 50% increase. You know that. So at least that's the minimum you can do. That's my suggestion. But in saying that, the approach you are taking is worthwhile. Leaving it till you get some clarity in terms of projects you can do, and they are more sensible rather than just going to the people with whatever figure we can think of the rates required based on non-delivery. So I totally support that, but I do say that please adjust it in inflation, because it says in the policy it has to be inflation adjusted. We haven't done it, so please look at that. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth.
Yeah, thank you, through the mayor. There's a couple of wastewater systems which are going to sneak up and catch us, and that's one was mentioned, the Te Kaupere one, and the other one is the Paparoa one, but I see there's a Kaiwaka one there. Councillor Howard made that Dargle was a bit of a charity case with their one, but I will point out that Mangawhai's wastewater scheme is going to exceed Dargle's proposed one. Even with the development contribution of $24,712 for Mangawhai to put that as a payment for the full Mangawhai upgrade, it means that it's 3,000 sections, which will in effect double Mangawhai's population. So it's not feasible. There's not enough land there to do that. So even the Mangawhai scheme is not going to pay for these septic systems. So I just want to point that out, that it's right across the board. It's not just Dargle, it is right across the board through the whole district. Exactly. Thank you.
Okay. Any further inputs here? Okay, I mean, I want to add something regarding the emissions policy. I think that it should come to council or pass off, because you've got large charities in New Zealand that have got huge businesses. If you had one in your district that wanted, you know, like shooting the breeze here, you wanted to build a chicken farm for 100 million, you'd want them to be paying contributions, wouldn't you? Just because they're a charity doesn't mean they get exemption, right? I mean, the schools, for example, when you build a new school, the traffic volumes are huge that are generated from the building of a school. So I take on board what Deputy Mayor Larson has said there. And I think, you know, the inflation adjusted thing is common sense. Okay, anyone else want to add? Okay, thank you, Anna and Sue. I'm going to call for a cup of tea now.
Can I just take us back, just to be clear on the direction, please, because I'm not 100% clear here. So what I've heard is you're happy with us to tweak the policy as Sue suggested. I've heard that two or four making the remissions approvals come back to council, and one of the councillors is not. So, I mean, is that the direction that we're going to include in this policy?
And can I just clarify that it could hold up people, developers themselves, if they have to wait a month when they're trying to actually get their section 224s, because that's what it's stopping them get.
So we need direction. So, I mean, I feel like we're at a place where we do need to just tweak the policy and do it in the extended plan. I acknowledge everybody's commentary about that. We just haven't the time on this. To be honest, and we've
just to give the clarity, let's just quickly go around the table and get people's views just very quickly. You support the business policy is not before the council or not? Councillor, I've had Councillor Larson's input.
Anderson, I'd like to.
So Anderson, what's your thinking?
I can go to it first. Go to it first.
Want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to be harsh, but I don't accept that there hasn't been time to do this. And I distinctly remember it being flagged for a very long time. I don't think the removal of the three waters from our budgets came as a particular surprise. The new government indicated through its whole campaign that it was going to rescind the three waters. It did eventually happen in December or whatever, but it was certainly coming. I know I've mentioned it. I know Councillor Williams has mentioned it a lot, that we wanted to see the new numbers, that we wanted them amended. And so I don't accept that it's come as a surprise and there hasn't been time. I believe there has been time. I think the maths can't be that complicated that it can't simply be done and seen. That may alleviate everyone's concerns about it. I reiterate what I said about remissions. Let's bring them back to council. We're just giving away other people's money if we go arbitrarily allowing everything to be approved. Some of them might be quite inappropriate. There are large, very wealthy people, organisations that have been given charitable status in this country, and we want to put some checks and balances around that from a local council perspective. Otherwise, why are we even here if we just let everything that's been approved at a central government level run through? checks and balances in place with remission.
Ron Manderson.
Thank you. I'm not too sure about the relevance of this, but I haven't heard the conversation covering the real core issues. I ask you to advise me why anybody wants to come to Kaipara and what we in Kaipara are doing that might encourage people to come to Kaipara. Have we got a natural resource to be harvested? Have we got employment opportunities? Have we got demonstrably lower living costs and concurrent employment opportunities? What do we offer? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I think I've said what I've said on the development contributions. But as far as the remissions go, yeah, I think there should be checks and balances because it does impact ratepayers at the end of the day. So I would agree with it coming back to council.
Okay, Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, I'm on the same view as the Deputy Mayor, and I raise it first, but you know, I've seen some of the expenditure going into education, jobs, and the consultancy, and absolute mountain of costs going in there, and to think that ratepayers are now going to have to sponsor the education board to start up a school. I feel the same way with emergency services, and also with charitable organisations. Some of those are hiding under that. In the relationship to Mariah, I think most of them are established anyway, so there'll be very unlikely that new Mariah will start up. And, most of those are well established, and it's not going to be a new thing. So I think we need to come back to us.
Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, on remission, I'm at par with most of us in terms of bringing it to the council to see that, because it is a recurring thing and a recurring theme. So it has to be done wisely and should not be based on different parameters. On development contribution, as I stated earlier, it has to be adjusted based on the future growth, which is realistic. And if we are talking the numbers which are not cohesive and not making logical sense in terms of whether they can actually fund those infrastructure, the development contributions cannot be the sole source to fund those growth. It should be done on the basis of inflation adjustment and the possible growth scenario in the district, as Councillor Anderson mentioned, that what we are bringing to Kaipara. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
I thought I had mine, but to give you my thoughts on the remissions issue, I think they're going to apply in a very small number of situations, and I see it as an operational thing, the discretion to be exercised. So I'm quite happy for it to be dealt with at chief executive level without having one more thing on our council agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On remissions, I seem to recall that there's been moves that government departments and the likes actually pay us rates rather than not paying us rates, and it's a change. And I think that it's fair that the same would apply in this situation to DCs and the like. So I think that's clear. That can be left at CEO level. I don't really have a hard view either way. I think that what we have to do, though, is be very clear on some of the points of allowance of remissions, if indeed that's going to be the case. On the matter of DCs, I can't say it any more clearly. I just have a concern that when we've been in a negative scenario, and I use Mangawhai as an example for some time now, and the longer we leave the likes of that DC as is, the further back we go, as far as I'm concerned. And, you know, the principle is that ratepayers do not pay for this work, this development, this new infrastructure. The development, the growth does. And so I think that the sooner that we can get to figures that absolutely reflect where we're moving forward as accurately as possible, I think that will be the right way for us to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I concur with what was raised by Councillor Vincent. And from what I've read in the policy, it's on a case-by-case basis anyway, and I think that we can leave that. I would appreciate leaving that with the CE for the reasons already outlined. Thank you.
That's a Pariora.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me that this is an operational matter of her checks and balances. That's where we drive policies, and if we want to put some checks and balances in, then that'll go into a policy. The CEO is more than capable of taking things on a case-by-case basis. And you know what they say, hard cases make bad law. So who are we to judge different applications? And I don't think that councillors are checks and balances sitting around a table. I think that the CEO, the operations and the staff dealing directly with the developers are the checks and balances. And we're making a huge assumption here in that the government will even pay development contributions towards local government. So that's one huge glaring assumption that we actually need to see whether that's even possible. Otherwise, it's to fall back on schools who don't have funding available, and may mean that the schools don't go ahead at all. But yeah, I take the point around the charitable trusts, and that we would probably need to develop the policy a little bit further in terms of what we want, what we consider would be a charitable organisation that should get the remission versus one that shouldn't. If we're saying that all shouldn't get them, then the policies should just remove them altogether to avoid any doubt or uncertainty or discretion that may apply. Yeah, that's my direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we can. Councillor Manderson.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask again, why would anybody come to Kaipara? What's the clear advantage of a person shifting to Kaipara? What are we doing to make it more attractive?
I think that's what we're trying to do through our development, economic development strategies going forward, Ron.
Well, I'm calling for examples, please.
I think this, yeah, I think that Councillor Manderson has a valid point, and we do need to look on that. I think we do need to move on, but I just wanted to clarify that actually talking about something like this remissions example, where it's being said that it's just an operational matter. Ironically, so many of the things that come to us through our council decision-making papers, which may seem quite minor, like the approval of the naming of a road, closure of a road for a rally, etc., all come through the council papers, and yet I don't hear anyone protesting about that every month. Well, there's no change. There's been no change proposed to delegations, etc., around those things, and
It's a requirement.
Or maybe it is, but still, they're still minor matters, aren't they?
They are. Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. I think I'll break for a cup of tea, eh?
Good idea.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I agree. We break for a cup of tea. So we'll tweak the policy to have it coming to council for approval. That's fine. We do need to agenda out tomorrow for the LTP and the SIG documents. We're going to need to take extra time with this, fortunately. So we need to get on and adjust and tweak the policy as Sue's outlined today to get in there. I acknowledge your feedback and acknowledge your thoughts, but we're really in a place where we need to push through. Yeah, that's fair. Apologise for that, but that is what it is. The last point I'd make is sometimes it's really good to remember the past. And we've told you many times when, despite campaigns and incoming government intentions, we were required to ensure that Three Waters was out of our draft LTP until the government was elected and came in and gave us clear, strong direction on that approach, which wasn't done till the end of December. I've also said many times, we are a small council, can't do everything. We couldn't do a backup LTP and we had to prioritise our workload. So I just say that, just so that you acknowledge the past and where we are and why we're here. Happy to break now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
convene this briefing for the 20th of March. We're going to skip item 4 and come back to it later, and we're going to go into publicly excluded item now, so that home, so we'll.
Just give us